A mysterious elf-like woman offers a golden coin, calling it a chance. She explains it's an opportunity for him to escape his current kind of life. However, she reminds the boy, Istofa, that the power to change his fate lies with him. The story is set in Otoria, the labyrinth city of the Farod Kingdom, where dungeons can appear at any time. While adventurers gather to test their might, a young boy, Istofa, sits alone in an alley. Shivering and weak, Istofa sits against a dirty wall. His eyes reflect his desperate state. His stomach rumbles painfully as he thinks about how hungry he is. He knows that he needs to get some money, and soon. As Istofa heads out, a man calls out to him asking if he's going to work. A group of hooligans mockingly notes that he must be looking for herbs again to make some pocket money. They smirk and sarcastically encourage him to do his best and gather a lot of money. Istofa glares back, knowing their taunts hold a more sinister meaning. The men laugh, adding a veiled threat about whether those herbs will still be there. Onlookers recognize that the Weeder boy has been caught by the hooligans again, noting he's a pushover who always gets his money taken. They recall that Istofa came to the city after being kicked out of his house due to poverty and praise him as a diligent boy for avoiding slave traders. Another person remarks that he's quite a fighter for not being dragged down by his environment as he walks away with determination. He walks with a determined look on his face. He passes through the city gate, heading out into the fields. A guard greets him, asking if he is gathering herbs again today. Istofa smiles sadly and confirms, stating that it is the only thing he can do. The guard wishes him well, and Istofa thanks him before leaving. Suddenly, he bumps into a passing adventurer. The adventurer reacts with disgust, wondering what is with this filthy kid. Istofa quickly apologizes from the ground, while the adventurer asks if his purse is all right. The adventurer curses at Istofa, but the guard quickly steps in to stop him. The guard warns the new faces that if they keep making noise, he will kick them out. The guard notices the man's bracelet and identifies him as a silver-class adventurer. The adventurer smugly claims that the city's prosperity is thanks to them, so the guard cannot just kick them out. The guard, though annoyed, directs the adventurer away from Istofa. Istofa overhears the adventurer mention his plan to test his abilities in the city. Watching them leave, Istofa quietly vows that someday it will be him. He picks himself up and walks away with purpose. Istofa works alone in a vast field of herbs. He carefully pulls the valuable plants from the ground. He pauses his work, wiping sweat from his brow. His hunger gnaws at him. He laments that he cannot pick fruits from the forest because of the dangerous monsters. He knows that working with his bare hands is not efficient. He desperately wishes he had a tool to work with. He resolves that he must keep moving his hands to earn anything at all. He dreams of having a weapon to fight monsters, allowing him to go into the forest or a dungeon. As he thinks about being able to fight for himself, someone approaches him. The thought that his life could definitely change fills him with hope. He believes he could actually get out of this place. Suddenly, an elf woman appears upside down right in front of him, startling him. He stares in shock as she lands gracefully. He lets out a cry of surprise, completely caught off guard. The elf apologizes with a smile, asking if he was surprised. Istofa can only stammer a denial, still in shock. He takes in her features, blue eyes, white skin, and long ears, thinking she is a beautiful woman. He notices her splendid equipment, realizing it is far beyond what the other adventurers had. Istofa wonders who she is, his heart pounding. She crouches down and notes that he seems surprisingly familiar with the plants. She adds that he can even distinguish the real herbs from their poisonous lookalikes. Istofa explains that he bought the information from the guild. She thinks that's a good thing, observing that even those who only think about money know their stuff regarding pricing. The elf points out that the selling price of herbs is not cheap. Istofa glumly states that there is nothing he can do about it. He explains that he has no family or money, and this is his only source of income. Therefore, he must continue doing this work, even for just a little money. Istofa agrees that his situation is strange. The elf questions why he looks so ragged if he's earning a decent wage. He explains to the shocked elf that his money gets stolen. Since he can't afford an inn, he sleeps on the street where he is repeatedly robbed, and even when he hides his money, they beat him until he faints and take it anyway. The elf remarks that she'd heard life in the city was rough, but to see how true it is makes her laugh at how hopeless humans can be. She gets up to leave and asks for his name. He tells her his name is Istofa. She smiles and then tosses something toward the startled boy. Estofa catches the object she threw. In his hand is a gleaming gold coin. He shouts in disbelief, realizing it is a 10,000 in gold coin. She explains that it is like an information fee, and she did disturb his job after all. Estofa stammers that he cannot possibly accept something like this. She grows stern, asking him why he cannot just accept things that are given to him. She asks if he doesn't want to end up in his current state. She clarifies that all she did was give him a chance to get out of here. She tells Estofa that whether he uses it or not is his own decision. Her words resonate with Estofa, the choice is up to him. He looks at the 10,000 in coin, realizing he can at least get a dagger with it. With a weapon, he too could fight. The elf tells him she likes a hardworking kid, as Estofa realizes he can truly change his life. She smiles and tells him to hang in there. A blush creeps onto Estofa's face. He bows deeply, promising he understands and thanking the light elf One-san. She gets embarrassed at being called One-san. As she leaves, she introduces herself as Stella and tells Estofa she hopes they can meet again. As she turns, Estofa notices a golden bracelet on her arm. He realizes in awe that she is a gold-class adventurer. He vows that someday he too will become one. Estofa arrives at Fleet's armor shop. He cautiously looks inside the shop. The shopkeeper, Fleet, grabs him, asking what he's doing and accusing him of trying to steal. Fleet recognizes the boy and greets him as Estofa. Fleet remarks that Estofa looks like a wreck as usual and asks what he wants, stating he has no jobs for him. He then jokes, asking if Estofa is actually here as a customer. Estofa nervously says that he actually is. He presents the coin, asking if Fleet can sell him some weapons. He declares with conviction that he wants to be an adventurer. Fleet is impressed that Estofa managed to get a 10,000 in coin. He tells Estofa that this amount won't get him any armor, but Estofa insists he'll take whatever he can get. Fleet agrees, understanding the boy's desperation. Fleet pats Estofa's head, promising to help him. He tells his daughter Kay to take the dirty boy for a bath, which will be included in the bill. Fleet adds that if Estofa wants to be an adventurer, taking care of himself is important. Kay provides soap and water for a wash, and a grateful Estofa thanks her. While he washes, Kay apologizes to Estofa for not being able to help him all this time. She reveals that her dad was actually very worried about him as well. She smiles, saying that is why she is very glad for him now. She leaves a set of clothes for him before her father calls for her. Estofa finds Fleet waiting for him. Fleet comments on how refreshed he looks and explains he found some old clothes that should fit. Fleet offers a complete set including an iron sword, clothes, shoes, a bag and a belt, all for 10,000 in. He even throws in some food, asking the stunned Estofa what he thinks. Estofa stares in disbelief. Fleet asks if he's not satisfied, but Estofa quickly says he is. Estofa asks why Fleet has gone to such an extent for him. He wonders if it is just because he brought some money. Fleet tells him to look outside the shop. Estofa looks outside, confused. He sees the group of hooligans loitering in the alley. Fleet points out that though those jobless men might be bigger, they are cowards. He explains they lack the courage to even try fighting a monster, which is why they can only fall and rot away. Fleet asks Estofa his age, and the boy replies that he is maybe 13. Fleet smirks, explaining that he wants to see a rascal like Estofa work hard and rise up instead of ending up rotten, and so he will offer his support. Fleet enthusiastically pushes a plate of bread towards him, telling him to eat. Estofa thanks him for the food. He takes a bite of the bread. He exclaims that it's good, so different from the weeds he ate when he had no money. Overcome with emotion, Estofa cries as he eats, remarking that it's so good he finally feels like a real human. Fleet reassures him that while the sword looks precious, it's just an ordinary but well-made iron sword within his budget. Estofa looks at his new appearance, ready for his journey. Fleet and Kay look on proudly, with Fleet exclaiming that he now looks like a proper adventurer. Looking in a mirror, Estofa thinks he looks like someone else entirely, amazed that he could change this much. He knows he must express his gratitude to Stella-san. Estofa enthusiastically promises Fleet and Kay that he'll make a lot of money and promote their shop. He waves goodbye as he sets off on his new path. Unbeknownst to him, the local hooligans watch from a nearby alley. Estofa reflects on how money is necessary to be seen as a decent human. He resolves to become a successful adventurer, so he can earn a good income and one day meet Stella again with confidence. With his goal firmly set, Estofa runs through the city streets with newfound purpose. He knows there is only one place for him to go. This place is known as Labyrinth City. It draws a ceaseless flow of adventurers eager to test their abilities. The reason for its name and allure lies at the very heart of the city. Estofa arrives at his destination, the dungeon. Other adventurers are gathered near the entrance. Beyond them, a dark, foreboding stairway descends into the unknown depths. An adventurer recognizes Estofa as the Weeder boy and asks what he's doing there. Despite being startled, Estofa confidently confirms that he is making his dungeon debut. These dungeons are mysterious caves that appear at random times and places. The adventurer explains that no one knows for sure where the dungeons led. While the dungeon is filled with countless monsters, it also holds vast treasures. It's an adventurer's job to gather those resources. With a word of encouragement, he wishes Estofa luck and heads inside. A guard at the entrance notes Estofa's basic equipment and advises him not to be reckless. As a bit of free advice, he suggests looking for a magical stone near the core. Estofa is unsure what a magical stone is. As he begins his descent, he ponders the guard's words. His heart pounds with anticipation as he goes deeper into the dungeon. He continues his descent down the long stairs. He realizes it's an exit and senses that everything is about to change. A bright light shines from the opening, forcing him to shield his eyes. Emerging from the stairway, Estofa finds himself not in a cavern but in a vast, sunlit field. He stares in utter disbelief at the unexpected landscape, marking the true, strange beginning of his life as an adventurer. It all began with 10,000 gold coins. Estofa recalls the words of Stella, a famous adventurer who gave him the money, telling him it was up to him what he did with it. With newfound determination, he resolves to become a first-class adventurer just like her. Entering the dungeon, Estofa finds himself in an unexpected grassy field. He reflects that while the world hasn't been friendly, things are looking up. He stares out at the strange new environment, wondering what will happen next. He marvels at the sight of a sun, despite supposedly being underground. The grass also looks completely real. This, he realizes, is a dungeon. He knows little about this mysterious labyrinth. Information about what lies inside is too expensive for him to afford yet. With no other choice but to press forward, Estofa steels his resolve. He begins to run. He soon becomes disoriented, realizing that no matter how far he runs, the scenery remains exactly the same. Suddenly, he spots someone in the distance, wondering if it's another adventurer. As the figure comes into view, his eyes widen in shock. It's not what he expected at all. The creature standing before him is not human, it's a goblin clutching a crude club. Estofa freezes, identifying the monster as a goblin. He notices that it hasn't seen him yet. Realizing this is his chance, he prepares to strike. Steeling his nerves, he resolves to attack. He lets out a war cry and charges forward. The goblin turns, startled by his cry. He swings his sword, but the goblin is quick to react, blocking the blow with its club. The force of the impact sends Estofa stumbling backward. He curses his failure. He can't believe he's no match for a goblin, considered the weakest of all monsters. But he knows he must defeat it to move on. He grits his teeth, determined to succeed. He prepares to charge once more. The goblin swings its club. Estofa manages to duck under the attack. With a determined yell, he lands a solid blow. The goblin lets out a final scream before collapsing. Exhausted, Estofa catches his breath. He wonders if it's finally over. He then recalls the guard's advice to retrieve the magic stone. As he approaches the body to search for the core, he feels a sharp pain. He screams. He realizes with horror that the goblin is still alive. The creature lunges at him. Just as the goblin is about to attack, a figure flashes past, saving Estofa. Estofa sits in shock, realizing he's been saved. It's Stella, who warns him not to let his guard down. She explains that goblins are known as beginner killers because they are cunning creatures. Estofa is speechless at her sudden appearance. Stella greets him cheerfully, remarking that he seems to be working hard. He recognizes her as Stella-san. He stammers his thanks for her help. She brushes it off, saying she volunteered and that some people complain when offered help. Stella playfully pats his head, commenting on her past troubles with other adventurers. As they walk together, Estofa asks if she is also exploring the dungeon. She reveals with a smile that she actually came here to meet him. Estofa is surprised to hear this. Stella explains that she figured if he ever used the gold coin she gave him to change his future, he would inevitably end up in this dungeon. She notes that he looks better than she expected. She's also surprised he managed to get some decent gear. He sheepishly admits the shop owner chose it for him. Stella praises him, saying his good fortune must be due to his diligent nature. Confused, Estofa tells her he's been living on the streets since he came to the city. His confession leaves Stella utterly shocked. Estofa notices the goblin's body has disappeared. He panics thinking it's still alive. Stella quickly tells him to calm down. She explains that it's just time up. She elaborates that in this dungeon, which has a different environment from the outside world, monsters don't leave behind a carcass. Stella tells him that he'll need to be faster next time if he wants the magic stone. She reminds him that this is his first dungeon. She encourages him to do his best next time. Feeling dejected that he needed help, Estofa feels like he's being tased. He thanks her. He promises to do better. With a quick goodbye, Estofa runs off. Stella tries to stop him. But he's already gone. She smiles to herself, thinking that there will be another chance. Alone again, Estofa ventures deeper. He spots another goblin. Remembering Stella's words about their cunning nature, he resolves to pay attention. He steels himself for the fight, determined to succeed this time. He attacks the goblin with a powerful slash. He reminds himself to stay alert. He makes sure to finish it off completely this time. He confirms the goblin is definitely dead. He quickly moves to retrieve the magic stone before the body disappears. He successfully retrieves the magic stone from the goblin's corpse. He wonders what it does. He knows it must be a valuable item. He decides to collect as many as he can. Looking back, Estofa sees the goblin's body has vanished, leaving no trace. He finds it strange how they seem to appear out of thin air. He resolves to be more careful from now on. Suddenly, a goblin appears right behind him and attacks. Estofa is shocked, certain that nothing was there a moment ago. He desperately raises his sword to block. The blade cracks under the force of the blow. He now faces two goblins, one wielding a strange dagger. With his only weapon now broken, he panics. He doesn't think he can win and wonders what to do. In a desperate move, Estofa throws his broken blade. The goblin is startled by the projectile. He then turns and kicks the other one hard. His surprise attack works, and he manages to defeat the goblins. He sighs in relief. He notes that at least goblins aren't very bright. Then, to his horror, he realizes his sword is gone. He searches the tall grass, but concludes it will be difficult to find his sword. He worries about what Fleet would say, and knows being unarmed in the dungeon is a bad idea. He then spots the dagger the goblin dropped and wonders if he can take it. He picks up the dagger, noticing how sharp it is. Since his sword is broken and he lacks the money to fix it, he considers keeping the weapon. He's struck by a sudden idea. In a moment of desperation, he pleads to no one in particular to let him have it. He sighs, knowing it's a futile wish. As he mumbles to himself, he notices the goblin's body and the magic stone have vanished. Just as he gives up, he spots something sparkling in the grass. He leans in for a closer look. He discovers a dagger. He notices this one is different from before and looks new. He briefly wonders if it's a gift from God. He speculates that perhaps if he doesn't take the magic stone, something else appears. However, he decides it's too risky to test that theory now, especially since he needs to save money for dungeon information. He reflects on the fact that everyone is nice when you have money, and he is barely hanging on. The world is not kind to those who have nothing. But after his recent string of luck, he considers that maybe the world is kinder than he initially thought. Deciding against keeping the new dagger, he resolves to look for his broken sword a bit longer. He turns around and is startled. Another adventurer is standing right behind him. Estofa is surprised to see another adventurer holding his sword. The adventurer gets his attention. The man asks him if the broken sword he's holding is his. Relieved, Estofa confirms it is, thinking the man seems nice. The adventurer then asks if Estofa thought he was always there. The adventurer correctly guesses that Estofa thought he appeared suddenly, just like the monsters. He clarifies that he's been there for a while, and the monsters also don't just appear out of nowhere. He explains that while this place looks like a calm meadow, it's actually a very dangerous place. He calls this place the Blindfold Meadow, explaining that it covers your eyes from what's after you. He then asks about the new dagger Estofa is holding. Estofa explains it appeared after he killed a goblin, and asks if the man knows anything about it. The adventurer identifies it as a rare drop from a goblin scout, worth around 30,000 een. Estofa is shocked to learn the dagger is worth 3 gold coins. The adventurer returns his broken sword, and Estofa thanks him profusely. He's embarrassed to have lost it so soon after buying it. The man advises him to be careful, as not everyone is so kind. Estofa cheerfully replies that so far he's only met good people. The adventurer says that's good. He then smiles menacingly and asks if that means he will be Estofa's first bad guy. Estofa is left confused and unsettled by the sudden change in tone. Before Estofa can react, the adventurer strikes and Estofa collapses to the ground. Estofa is completely paralyzed. The man calmly explains that he used a fast-acting tranquilizer with very light after effects. Looming over the paralyzed Estofa, the adventurer repeats that this is the Blindfold Meadow. He adds that it's not surprising for things to be hiding in the tall grass and ominously declares that this is the dungeon's precedent. The adventurer looms over the paralyzed Estofa, explaining that this is the Blindfold Meadow, a place where things can easily hide in the tall grass. Estofa finds himself completely unable to move or speak, trapped within his own body. The adventurer inspects the magic dagger he's taken from Estofa, musing that it might sell for a cheap price. Estofa desperately pleads for it back, claiming it's his. The man laughs, claiming it's his now. He then menacingly asks Estofa if he should just kill him. As Estofa lies helpless, the adventurer mocks his weak cries for help. He states the meadow is too secluded for anyone to see or hear him. He cruelly remarks that he pities the boy for his sudden misfortune after a bit of good luck. Estofa laments his helplessness, not wanting his life to end this way. Terrified, his mind screams that he doesn't want to die. The adventurer cruelly bids him farewell. His thoughts fade into a desperate plea for help. Suddenly, a flash of movement, and the adventurer's arm is severed, falling to the ground. He stares in shock. The adventurer screams in agony over his severed arm. A calm voice says, "Indeed, I feel pity." Stella stands over the injured man, sword in hand, remarking that he will die here and become goblin food. She smirks, calling him a poor thing. He panics, yelling about his arm. Stella asks if he is all right, noting no big injury. Still disoriented, Estofa sees Stella. Stella tells him to give her a moment to clean up first. Meanwhile, the first adventurer frantically searches for his own severed limb. The defeated adventurer cries for help. Stella finds it strange. She reminds him that he himself had just said it was useless to call for help in this place. With a swift motion, she finishes him off. Stella casts a spell to cure Estofa's paralysis. She asks if he's okay now. As feeling returns to his body, he realizes with astonishment that he can move again. He realizes he's alive. Overwhelmed with relief, Estofa breaks down, thanking Stella for saving him. She comforts him, saying it was a scary experience. She reassures him that it is all right now. She explains that she was chasing after him and thankfully made it on time. Estofa apologizes, but Stella reassures him it's okay and suggests they leave the dungeon first. As they walk, she mentions there is something she wants to tell him. She says she will tell him once they get out. Estofa finds himself in a well-furnished room. He looks around in stunned silence. Stella brings him a cup of hot milk. When Estofa asks where they are, she explains it's the inn she is staying at. She figured a quiet place would be best for the long conversation they needed to have. After taking a sip of her drink, Stella addresses Estofa. She looks directly at him and asks a stunning question: does he want to be her husband? Estofa is left speechless by the proposal. Seeing his confusion, Stella clarifies that she means becoming a married couple. Stella grabs his hands and declares him absolutely perfect. She explains that most people in his situation would become twisted. However, he has kept his ambition and strong will, which is a rare quality. She announces that he has passed. A flustered Estofa asks her to wait. He protests, pointing out that he's only 13. He adds that surely there are better people out there. Stella laughs, agreeing that might be true. However, she states there's a specific reason it has to be him. To demonstrate her point, Stella effortlessly conjures a small ball of fire. Estofa is amazed to see magic up close. She explains that elves are a special race with the highest level of magical power, but this comes with a shortcoming. She reveals that because of their high magical power, elves cannot conceive children with other elves. Therefore, they must find a partner from a different race with low-level magical power. She knew instantly that Estofa had an unusually low level of magic power, in other words, 0. Estofa is shocked by the word 0. Stella explains it means he has an extremely low chance of using any magic at all. He would likely have a hard time with even a beginner spell like Little Fire. This revelation hits Estofa hard, as he knows he needs at least basic magic to conquer dungeons. The realization that he can't use magic feels fatal for his dream of being an adventurer. Seeing his dejection, Stella comforts him. She explains that when he defeats a monster, the absorbed magical power will enhance his physical abilities instead. Stella illustrates that since he has no magical power to enhance, all absorbed energy will boost his physical power. Estofa realizes he can still become stronger, even without magic. Stella advises him to focus on developing one specialization, instead of being an average adventurer. With this path, Stella declares, his dream of becoming a top-class adventurer is no longer out of reach. Estofa is struck with newfound hope. Stella offers to mentor him on the path to becoming an adventurer. He is amazed by the possibility of having her as a mentor. She adds with a wink that if he takes her offer now, he'll get a cute bride as well. She asks if it is quite an offer. Estofa considers his recent brush with death, realizing he needs to get stronger before facing such a foe again. His first priority is to become even stronger. He tells Stella that he's not ready for a relationship, as he's focused on becoming a full-fledged adventurer. He bows deeply and asks her to be his mentor. Stella understands, acknowledging that he wants to start with a master-disciple relationship first. Stella agrees without hesitation. Estofa is overjoyed, but she reminds him that as an elf she doesn't age. She teases that feelings can develop over time in a master-disciple relationship, prompting a flustered Estofa to ask her to treat him kindly. Stella formally accepts him as her disciple, saying she is pleased to meet him again. Estofa happily agrees to be in her care. She then cheekily suggests that if master is too formal, he could call her husband instead, an offer he immediately refuses. With their agreement settled, Stella announces their first task: go to a guild and register as a party. She then presents him with something else. She places the dagger he found back on the table in front of him. Estofa thinks of Flate. He says he needs to go apologize for breaking the sword. Stella waves it off, saying that's not what she's talking about. She explains that she's quite interested in the shop that sells such a weapon, a mysterious smile on her face. The guild master expresses his doubt, noting that Estofa is still just a beginner adventurer. Estofa places the magic stone on the counter as proof. The guild master recognizes the item as a goblin's magic stone. He asks Estofa if he managed the feat by himself, and Estofa confirms that he did. Stella proudly asserts that Estofa is a capable adventurer, good enough to join a party. The guild master concedes the point and agrees to purchase the magic stone for the guild. He then addresses Estofa directly, his decision made. The Eltria Branch Guild officially recognizes Estofa as a formal adventurer and rents him a bronze bracelet to signify his new rank. The guild master calls for everyone to give their new comrade a big welcome, leaving Estofa in awe. The other adventurers in the guild cheer for him, offering congratulations and words of encouragement. Stella remarks that this is how things are, finding it all quite fun. The reality sinks in for Estofa. They truly recognize him as an adventurer. With gritted teeth and newfound determination, he accepts his new role. He bows deeply, thanking everyone and promising to do his best, while they tell him not to get killed. Estofa asks Stella about the meaning of their party name, Gladio. She explains that in an old elven language, it means the vast land. Stella adds that the name is fitting, as it's the color of his hair, the land's soil. Estofa is surprised to hear it's about him. Leaning in close, Stella declares that it's because she will nurture him into a man capable of leading her someday. Stella cheerfully tells him they're going to the weapon shop and then heading back to the inn. Estofa is surprised they are ending the day there, but Stella confirms it. He feels a sense of disappointment, having just been officially recognized as an adventurer. He resolves that he must fight in the dungeon as much as possible to become stronger. Suddenly a voice calls out, asking if that is him. Estofa recognizes the shopkeeper, Fleet, who notes that it's been half a day since he last saw him. Estofa is so lost in thought that he hadn't even realized they had arrived. With Stella's encouragement, Estofa greets the shopkeeper. Fleet asks who the elf is, and Stella introduces herself as Estofa's teacher from now on. Fleet is shocked that she is his teacher and warns Estofa not to be used by a weird stranger. Estofa tries to push back, but Fleet states he would never trust a word from an elf. Stella asks if he is one of those newbie hunters. Fleet questions if she gave Estofa a fancy weapon even though he's a beginner, causing him to be targeted. Stella tells Estofa to show him the broken sword, and Fleet reacts with shock. Estofa nervously presents the broken sword he had just purchased. Fleet examines the blade, noting the damage is bad and asking if his opponent had a unique weapon. He tells Estofa that what's important is that he's safe. Estofa explains that to fix damage like this, you have to fight a monster. Stella confirms she suspected as much. Fleet identifies the weapon as being made from dungeon iron. When Estofa asks what that is, Stella explains it is an iron material from the dungeon. Fleet clarifies that he collects dull swords from the dungeon, melts them down and recycles them. It's said that monsters and obtainable weapons from the dungeon are made with its magical power, which is why monsters disappear when killed. Stella reminds Estofa that, as she told him before, adventurers can become stronger by slightly absorbing that magical power. However, Fleet adds that this doesn't apply to just anyone. Weapons made from dungeon iron that defeat monsters can be strengthened by crushing a magic stone, which contains a mass of magical power. Estofa realizes that this means it's a weapon that can grow just like humans. Stella confirms this, explaining that's why it will heal on its own when he fights monsters. Estofa, amazed, asks Fleet why he was given such an awesome weapon. Fleet smirks, saying he figured Estofa couldn't afford the maintenance a normal weapon would need. He claims it was a piece of junk anyway, so it was cheap. However, he adds that he still chooses who he sells them to. Stella dryly notes the hidden agenda, prompting Fleet to retort that he doesn't want to hear it from a pompous elf. Fleet asks Estofa what he plans to do now, noting that going into the dungeon with a broken sword is alarming. Stella suggests he sell the magic iron dagger that dropped from the goblin for a new set of armor. Estofa protests, but Stella explains the dagger is for a magician and is useless to him since he has no mana. Estofa agrees with the elf, seeing that it's better to improve his defense. Fleet adds that he can tell from the sword's condition that Estofa is reckless in a fight. Estofa quietly admits that this is true. If he had a shield, the sword wouldn't have ended up this way, and armor would expand his range of fighting. Stella tells him that as an adventurer, he should always think before he acts. He needs to consider what to do to be strong and what is necessary to achieve that. Patting his head, she tells him that the point is to make the right choice. She clarifies that what she said was just a suggestion, and he is the one who decides what to do. Estofa considers what he needs to do as an adventurer. He calls out to Fleet, his decision made. He declares that he wants to sell the dagger and get armor with the money. Estofa thanks Fleet for his help. As they leave, Fleet tells him to be careful on his way back. Fleet whispers to Estofa that he should ditch the elf soon, as nothing good comes from getting involved with them. Stella curses the dwarf, and when Estofa asks if their races don't get along, she confirms they are instinctively bad with each other. Though she finds it hard to admit, Stella concedes that the dwarf made a decent set of armor. Estofa admires his new hard leather armor, shoulder-length arm guard, leg guard and bonus steel dagger. Stella tells him it looks good on him. A shiver runs down his spine. He glances nervously toward Stella. Stella tells Estofa not to mind the figures lurking in the alley, assuring him they won't attack them. She warns him, however, that they are probably targeting him, and he should be careful when he's on his own. The shady figures whisper that they could steal his things right now. Estofa realizes with a shiver that even a moment of carelessness could lead to him being robbed. Estofa imagines being stolen from and kicked, forced back to life in the alley. He feels he has to work hard each day, or there will be no tomorrow for him. He mutters that he wants to be stronger and that there's no time to waste. Stella overhears him and agrees that it's good. She tells him that they can start tomorrow, which surprises him. Stella tells him she can tell what's on his mind. She correctly guesses he's thinking that if he doesn't work hard today, there will be no tomorrow. Estofa realizes she is not wrong. Stella tells him that while his way of thinking is valid, it is also wrong. She embraces him, explaining that what he's thinking is just a way of glossing over the fact that he's throwing your happiness today for tomorrow. She explains that when people work hard today, every day it means tomorrow won't come at all. She adds that from what she's heard, he hasn't been well rested. In order to be strong, it's also important to rest when it's time to rest. When Estofa hesitates, she firmly states that it's a teacher's order and he agrees. These were the words from someone he wanted to be like. Estofa grits his teeth, his resolve strengthening. He agrees and dashes off after Stella. He shouts that he'll do his best starting from tomorrow. Back in their room, Stella yawns, saying it's about time to sleep. She wishes Estofa a good night. She then notices him snuggling into a makeshift bed on the floor. She asks him what he is doing on the floor in the corner. Estofa nervously says that he's about to sleep. He asks if he's bothering her by sleeping there. Stella sighs that he'll get sick like this and lifts him up. She tosses him onto the bed. Estofa is left completely stunned by her actions. Stella explains that the double bedroom will be available late tomorrow, so they have to share the same bed for today. Estofa protests, but Stella tells him it's fine. She rolls into bed beside him and wishes him good night, leaving him flustered with a pounding heart. A series of unbelievable things happen today. He reflects on meeting Stella and his first dungeon trip, admitting that, of course, not everything went well. But he knows he is steadily moving forward. He glances over at Stella, who is fast asleep. He thinks that tomorrow, and even after that, he will continue to advance. With that final thought, he believes he'll make even more progress and drifts off to sleep. The next day, a determined Estofa stands ready, with Stella behind him. Another adventurer greets them, commenting that they're working hard by going into the dungeon again, and Estofa confirms it. Stella smiles and wishes him a safe trip. Estofa is shocked to hear that Stella isn't going inside with him. She explains that as his teacher, going with him would just hamper his growth, making it pointless. She asks if he won't be reckless again now that he knows how dangerous the dungeon is. Estofa nervously agrees and Stella praises him. Stella smiles and tells him she'll be praying for his safe return. Estofa agrees, declaring that he'll keep going. With renewed determination, he exclaims that he'll keep moving forward beyond this point and heads off. Estofa finds himself back in the blindfold meadow. It's a deceptively plain grassland where monsters can hide in plain sight. He steals his resolve, determined not to let his guard down this time. Suddenly, a goblin lunges at him. Estofa dodges, realizing the creature didn't appear from nowhere, but rather stepped from an invisible space into his visible range. He swiftly retaliates, felling the goblin with a single slash. Looking at the defeated monster, he notes with some satisfaction that he can now handle a normal goblin without much struggle. Pleased with his growing strength, Estofa celebrates his progress. Recalling Fleet's explanation, he knows that dungeon iron can repair itself by absorbing magic stones. He decides he must fix his sword first. He cracks a magic stone to begin the process. The sword begins to glow as the magic is absorbed. He inspects the blade, noticing it is somewhat fixed. He briefly considers that defeating stronger monsters might yield larger magic stones. He quickly dismisses the greedy thought, shaking his head. He decides to play it safe and focus on defeating as many goblins as he can for now. With renewed focus, he lets out a determined yell. As Estofa prepares to continue, another person suddenly appears. Estofa is startled by the sudden arrival. The newcomer, noticing Estofa's gear, asks if he is also an adventurer. The adventurer urgently yells for him to duck. A magical flare appears in the distance. He pulls Estofa to the ground as a fireball streaks through the air where he had just been standing. Estofa, stunned, asks what that was, and the adventurer identifies it as fire magic. Seeing the monster preparing another attack, Estofa frantically asks for help. The goblin's staff begins to crackle with energy. A magician goblin has appeared before them. The magician goblin unleashes another spell. The adventurer shouts a warning and kicks a startled Estofa out of the way. The spell misses, exploding harmlessly on the ground. Estofa draws the creature's attention. He realizes it casts a fireball every time it swings its staff. Knowing he must defeat it before it can attack again, he charges forward and stabs the magician goblin. The creature falls to the ground, defeated. The adventurer checks if Estofa is okay, admitting he kicked him on impulse. He sharply tells Estofa not to let his guard down. He points out that there is still a fighter goblin remaining. The fighter goblin readies its axe. The fighter goblin rushes forward and smashes Estofa's shield. Estofa cries out in frustration, as he just bought it yesterday. He realizes his cracked sword won't be able to block the creature's heavy axe. He turns to the magician, asking if he has a spell to defeat the goblin. The magician bluntly says no. He explains he can only use standard spells that won't do any damage and would only anger it more. Frustrated, Estofa feels like he's the only one doing anything. The magician points out Estofa's broken sword and questions if he can even fight with it. Estofa responds that he can manage as long as he dodges the axe. He grimly accepts that if he can't, they'll both die. Seeing his determination, the magician devises a plan. He'll shoot fire magic to blind the goblin, instructing Estofa to attack when he sees an opening. Estofa hesitates, wondering if he can truly trust this stranger. Deciding he has no other choice, he agrees to the plan. The magician prepares to cast his spell. The magician unleashes a blast of flame. The spell hits its mark, and the fighter goblin recoils in pain. The goblin is blinded and confused by the sudden attack. While the goblin is stunned, Estofa leaps onto its back. He drives his sword into its neck, delivering the final blow. With the last goblin defeated, the two stand over its body. The magician approaches, impressed, telling Estofa he's not bad at all as he collapses in relief. Estofa thanks him, acknowledging that his magic was a huge help. Estofa asks if he can have the monster's magic stone, and the magician agrees, since Estofa defeated it. The magician notes that the magician goblin's body has already disappeared. Estofa extracts the stone from the remaining corpse. He is shocked by its large size. The magician watches in surprise as Estofa prepares to use the magic stone. He cracks the large magic stone against his sword. The dungeon iron blade glows brightly as it absorbs the powerful magic. The sword is now fully restored. Estofa exclaims in delight at his repaired weapon. Kyle recognizes the weapon as dungeon iron, remarking on its strange properties. As Kyle turns to leave, Estofa stops him, realizing he hasn't gotten his name. He hesitantly introduces himself as Estofa. The magician smiles and introduces himself as Kyle. Kyle asks Estofa what he plans to do next, and Estofa replies that he'll keep defeating goblins to earn money. Kyle correctly guesses that Estofa's goal is to absorb the monster's magic to improve his own ability. Kyle then suggests that they join forces and hunt goblins together. Estofa is hesitant. He explains that he already has a party, but Kyle insists, pointing out that he's alone now and they could be a strong team. Kyle pleads with him, asking for just this once. He explains that he also came to the dungeon to defeat monsters and improve his magic. However, as Estofa saw, the goblins here were too strong for him to handle by himself. Kyle reminds Estofa that he also wants to be strong and suggests they team up until his own magic is stronger. He adds that it's more reassuring to have a partner than to go it alone. As a final incentive, he points out that Estofa wants money and offers him all the rewards for himself. Estofa is left speechless by the offer. After some thought, Estofa reluctantly agrees. Kyle celebrates their new partnership. Estofa can't help but feel like he's being taken for a ride. Kyle asks what he's worried about. He confidently declares that he will become a great magician and pay Estofa back, so he has nothing to lose. Kyle offers his hand, saying he'll be in Estofa's care. Estofa thinks to himself that while Kyle is weird, he doesn't seem like a bad person. He shakes Kyle's hand, agreeing to the partnership. Estofa recalls meeting a magician named Kyle who is being attacked by monsters on the dungeon's first floor. After defeating the monster together, the two decided to form a partnership. Estofa thought Kyle seemed like a good person, but was uncertain about what would happen from then on. Estofa asks Kyle why he chose him as a partner. He suggests that hiring a veteran adventurer would have been a better choice than teaming up with an amateur. Kyle nudges Estofa, telling him to drop the formality because they appear to be the same age. Kyle clarifies that he is not hiring Estofa, but rather they are allies. Estofa agrees, addressing him simply as Kyle. Kyle asks if Estofa bought any information on the dungeon, but Estofa replies that he couldn't afford it. Offering to teach him, Kyle explains that the floor is filled with goblin-type monsters, including common, magician, and fighter variants. Kyle stops mid-sentence, sensing a presence that isn't a goblin. Suddenly, a wolf-like monster jumps out, catching Estofa completely by surprise. Estofa shoves Kyle to safety, yelling for him to watch out. Kyle asks if Estofa is all right, who confirms he's okay despite the surprise. They stare down the snarling creature, a beast unlike any goblin they've seen. Kyle identifies the creature as a grass wolf, explaining it's much more violent than a goblin. He adds that grass wolves are far stronger in packs, but luckily this one appears to be alone. Just as they feel a moment of relief, the wolf lets out a loud howl. Estofa panics, realizing the wolf is calling for its pack. He insists they must run, as they can't possibly defeat a full pack. However, instead of fleeing, Kyle turns and unleashes a fire spell at the wolf. Estofa grabs Kyle and urges him to hurry. He pulls Kyle along, who complains about the speed. Finally stopping, Estofa believes they have outrun the creature. Exhausted, Kyle complains that Estofa's pace was deadly, but acknowledges they would have died if they stayed. Estofa thanks Kyle, acknowledging that they were saved because of him. Kyle admits he couldn't have outrun the wolf on his own. Curious, Estofa asks Kyle why he is so driven to become a grand magician. Kyle explains that he has no talent for swords or physical strength, but he is gifted in magic. He recalls learning even complex magic in less than a year. However, he explains that understanding theory is meaningless without enough mana. His early attempts at a flame spell resulted in nothing more than a bit of heat. This led to his family sneering at him and calling him a sham, a label he refuses to accept. Kyle declares that he is determined to prove them all wrong. He then asks Estofa what his own goal is for exploring the dungeon. Estofa sheepishly admits he doesn't have a particular goal like Kyle. Changing the subject, he asks what they should do next, while pondering his own motivations. Just as they are talking, the grass wolf reappears. The wolf lets out a furious roar, having tracked them down. Estofa prepares to fight, drawing his sword. Kyle confirms it's the same wolf from before, as there are only a few on this floor, meaning it must have caught up to them. The wolf leaps to attack. Estofa realizes in frustration that he can't hit the swift creature. He swings his sword but misses. The wolf easily evades the strike and bites his leg. Kyle shouts Estofa's name in alarm. Kyle rushes over to check on him, but Estofa reassures him that his armor took the bite. Estofa knows they can't escape the wolf. He acknowledges that he can't grasp its movements, making a head-on fight too dangerous. With new resolve, Estofa announces he has an idea. He tells Kyle that he will need his magic to pull it off. Estofa dashes towards the wolf, putting his faith in Kyle. Kyle braces himself, deciding he doesn't care what happens next. He unleashes his flame spell at the charging wolf. Estofa recalls seeing the wolf's fear of Kyle's magic. The wolf whines and backs away from the fire, giving Estofa the opening he needed. He reasoned that even if the spell wasn't powerful, the wolf would instinctively avoid it. He allows the wolf to bite his armor, trapping its jaw and sealing its movement. Estofa knew the wolf's fangs couldn't pierce his armor. Lifting the immobilized wolf, Estofa shouts for Kyle to attack now. Kyle smiles, pleased that the plan worked. Kyle casts his flame spell once more, hitting the trapped wolf. With the wolf distracted and unable to move, Estofa lands the final blow. The wolf falls to the ground, defeated. Overjoyed, they exclaim that they managed to kill the grass wolf. Kyle celebrates their growing strength, while Estofa gives credit to his magic. Estofa realizes he now understands how his armor can be used to create an offensive opening. Kyle remarks on their bad luck, having encountered a magician goblin, a fighter goblin, and a rare monster all in one go. Estofa asks if there are any stronger monsters on this floor, and Kyle confirms there is. Kyle explains that it's the floor guardian and they won't encounter it unless they try to advance. The thought of a floor guardian makes Estofa gulp nervously. Estofa eagerly asks for more details. Kyle playfully tells him that information isn't free. Kyle promises to tell him more once they're ready to face the challenge. Estofa smiles, commenting that he thought their partnership was only temporary. Kyle reminds him to grab the magic stone before the wolf's body disappears, which Estofa had forgotten. Estofa expresses his relief at securing the magic stone. Estofa explains that he's so happy because the stone is what will create his future. Understanding, Kyle graciously allows him to keep the stone. They practice their teamwork, with Kyle's magic setting up an attack for Istofa. Kyle feels his mana has increased but is still weak, while Istofa is impressed by the improvement. Kyle dreams of becoming a high-ranked magician who can defeat goblins with a single basic spell. This reminds Istofa of someone he's seen before, and Kyle eagerly asks who it was. Istofa mentions his master is an elf, which startles Kyle. Kyle explains his reaction, admitting he is jealous of the powerful magic of elves. Istofa enthusiastically suggests they continue hunting to become even stronger. As he turns, Istofa abruptly bumps into something. Kyle asks what's wrong as Istofa explains he bumped into something. Both Istofa and Kyle are stunned by the sudden appearance of another man. The mysterious man smiles and asks Istofa if he is all right. Istofa and Kyle come across another adventurer in the grassy plains of the dungeon who asks if Istofa is all right after he stumbled. Istofa notices the copper bracelet on the man's wrist, identifying him as an adventurer. Istofa apologizes, but the man dismisses it with a laugh, saying the place is nasty after all. The adventurer glances at their gear and asks if they are out hunting goblins. Istofa is relieved, thinking the man seems kind. However, Kyle pushes Istofa back, curtly telling the adventurer they don't need to share their plans. Istofa cries out Kyle's name in surprise, but the adventurer just laughs, finding the situation amusing. Istofa apologizes for his friend's behavior, and the adventurer says it's fine before leaving. Once the man is gone, Istofa asks Kyle why he acted that way when they'd finally encountered another person. Kyle asks if Istofa didn't realize the man was dangerous. Istofa argues that the man looked kind, but Kyle calls him an idiot, saying bad guys don't always look evil. Kyle explains that, in his experience, someone approaching with a kind face is the most dangerous type, recognizing the look of someone who does bad things for a living. Kyle tells Istofa to stay alert, reminding him that monsters aren't the only things that can harm him. The warning hits home for Istofa, who recalls a terrible experience from the previous day. As Kyle tells him to go, Istofa thinks that he would have been in trouble without him. Frustrated with himself, Istofa realizes he hasn't learned anything and needs to get a grip. Kyle warns that when you see someone like that wandering around, it's dangerous to stay in one place. He suggests they return to the surface for a moment, and Istofa agrees. Istofa asks where the exit is, only for Kyle to bluntly admit that he doesn't know. Istofa reacts with shock, and Kyle questions his surprise. Kyle explains that the exit isn't visible because they are in the blindfold meadows. He elaborates that the field is a vicious illusion created by the dungeon, so it's important to remember the direction you came from. Kyle yells in frustration, admitting he lost his bearings when they were running around. Realizing he made the same mistake yesterday with Stella, Istofa calls himself a fool. Kyle explains that while it's a gamble, they have two options. The first option is to get an orb of return. He clarifies that it's an item sometimes dropped by scout goblins that allows an instant return to the surface. Istofa points out that scout goblins have a low spawn rate, which Kyle confirms is why they have another option. Kyle explains that according to information, this space is a huge square. He adds that the entrance they came from is located near one of the four corners. Istofa understands their plan, get to a wall and follow it to eventually find the exit. Kyle questions if Istofa has the stamina for the long walk, but Istofa insists he'll manage, as his stamina has increased. They agree to head for the wall while also looking for a scout goblin. Wiping sweat from his brow, Istofa complains that they're only finding common goblins. He asks Kyle if there's a way to find them, but Kyle says they have to get close to see. Istofa wonders how the grass wolf managed to chase them, and Kyle suggests it followed their scent. Istofa wishes they could use a sense of smell to track things. Kyle mentions that there's a way for adventurers to track each other's mana. However, he quickly points out that since Istofa has hardly any mana, that option is out of the question. Istofa sheepishly agrees that he's right. Kyle asks Istofa what he's so upset about. He points out that Istofa is always making a face, like he has to do everything himself. Istofa denies it, saying that's not the case. He claims he was just thinking he should work harder. He recalls Fleetson mentioning he's a customer and Stellasan saying she likes him because he's diligent. Istofa feels he has to live up to their expectations. If he doesn't, he fears he'll end up back in the alley. He confesses to Kyle that he wants to be someone everyone likes, and that's why he has to be strong. He quickly apologizes for saying something weird, dismissing it as a selfish goal. As he turns to leave, Kyle grabs his shoulder to stop him. Kyle tells Istofa he can talk to him, demanding to know everything that has happened to him. Istofa hesitates, realizing this means telling Kyle about everything that happened before they met. He wonders what will happen if he tells Kyle about his past. Kyle promises Istofa that talking about it won't change things between them. Istofa quietly agrees to talk. Kyle grows gloomy, mumbling that this is why he wants to be an adventurer. Istofa reminds Kyle he just said it was all right, but Kyle brushes it off, saying he understands Istofa's plight. Kyle says he understands Istofa's goals, relating that he also started as someone with nothing. Istofa thinks to himself that if he had more mana, his family might have loved him. Kyle calls Istofa an ambitious person, saying it's a trait everyone has. Istofa thinks Kyle is being a bit too generous with his assessment. Kyle tells Istofa that he feels like he's rushing things desperately and will be overwhelmed by his goal. Istofa admits that Stellasan said the same thing. He knows he can't just rush into getting stronger. Still, he wonders what he is supposed to do. Istofa asks if this isn't what an ally is for. Kyle tells him he doesn't have to carry it all on his own, at least when it comes to magic. Kyle says he thinks of Istofa as his ally and would like to be friends too. He grabs Istofa's shoulder and tells him to depend on him more. Istofa is taken aback, questioning the idea of depending on someone. Kyle misinterprets his hesitation and asks if he doesn't want to, but Istofa clarifies that's not it. Istofa admits it's the first time anyone has ever said that to him. Kyle realizes that he's thinking about Istofa, that someone cares. Istofa feels a weight lifting from his heart and thanks Kyle. He then says he wants to know about Kyle too. Kyle flatly rejects the offer, leaving Istofa to complain that it's unfair since he just shared everything. Kyle brushes him off, saying there's nothing to know about him other than his future as a grand magician. He gives Istofa a sharp look. Kyle asks if Istofa can't get along with him unless he knows everything. Istofa replies that of course that's not the case. He sincerely tells Kyle that he wants to be his friend. Kyle is surprised for a moment. He then smiles and says, "Me too." Kyle bumps his fist against Istofa's, calling it a friendship ritual. Istofa smiles and says that, once again, it's nice to meet him. Kyle returns the sentiment with his own fist bump. Kyle suggests they get some sleep and explore more tomorrow, and Istofa agrees, adding that they should see if Stella is okay with it. Kyle teases him, asking if he's already ditching him now that they're friends. At last, a large brick wall looms before them. Istofa exclaims that it's the wall, feeling relieved that they must be close to the exit. Kyle agrees but adds a caveat, only if this is the right way to the exit. Istofa asks what he means, and Kyle reminds him that he called this a gamble. He explains that while the exit is definitely along the walls, there's a catch. The entrance to the second floor of the dungeon is also located around one of the corners. Istofa realizes with a gulp that if they find the entrance to the second floor, a guardian will be there, and they'll have to fight it. Kyle says that while they'll have to fight it eventually, he doesn't think they can win right now. As they walk along the wall, they come across a dark doorway. He observes there it is. Istofa wonders aloud if it's the exit, but Kyle admits he has no idea. They peer into the doorway, but it's too dark to see anything. Istofa reasons that if it's the exit, there should be a staircase leading up to the surface. But he worries about what will happen if it's the wrong one. They decide to enter the passageway. A heavy footstep looms from the darkness. The sound of rumbling armor echoes through the corridor. A loud clank makes Istofa turn around in alarm. Istofa shouts that something is in there and tells Kyle to run back to the staircase. They look back to see the staircase is leading down, not up. Suddenly, a massive armored figure blocks their path, cutting off their retreat. The Guardian, a hulking figure in armor, raises a massive club. Istofa cries out in horror, realizing it's the wrong one. They've lost the gamble. The massive Guardian crashes forward, startling Istofa. Seeing his friend in danger, Kyle shouts Istofa's name in alarm. Kyle quickly casts a flame spell that strikes the armored foe. The spell has no effect as the Guardian barely flinches. Kyle curses, realizing his magic is just for show against this enemy. He notes that all of its equipment is made of steel. Istofa states that challenging it with their current gear is too tough. Kyle suggests running away, but Istofa recalls that bosses are more agile than normal monsters. He theorizes that it is the guardian for the entrance to the next floor. Therefore, it should stop attacking if they move away from the place it's protecting. Kyle agrees that the theory is sound and worth a try. After a quick countdown, Istofa gives the signal and they both dash away from the guardian. The guardian lets out an angry roar but doesn't give chase. Relieved, Istofa notes that their plan worked. Kyle reminds him to keep his guard up as they exit the passageway. Just as they catch their breath, an arrow strikes the ground near Istofa. Kyle shouts his name in alarm, but Istofa confirms he's unhurt. They look up to find a goblin archer drawing another arrow, ready to fire from the tall grass. Before they can react, a swordsman goblin lunges at Istofa, who parries the attack. Kyle quickly assesses the situation. He identifies the two new monster types they're facing, a swordsman goblin and an archer goblin. Istofa warns Kyle to be careful, as the swordsman is more troublesome than a regular fighter since it knows sword techniques. The goblin attacks with incredible speed. Istofa finds himself struggling just to repel its fast strikes. Watching Istofa's struggle, Kyle feels helpless, knowing he can't support his friend with his lousy magic without risking hitting him. As he hesitates, arrows from the archer goblin whistle past him. He realizes he must deal with the archer himself. Kyle notices something odd about the archer. Its shots are erratic and don't seem to be aimed correctly. A moment of realization dawns on him. He shouts to Istofa, telling him to handle the swordsman. Kyle clenches his staff, deciding to deal with the archer himself. He understands that the goblin can't get a clear shot, while Istofa and the swordsman are constantly moving. He resolves to seize the opportunity, remembering the saying, "The early bird gets the worm." Kyle charges forward towards the archer. The archer hastily draws its bow. He taunts that a rushed shot won't hit anything. He swings his staff with a powerful war cry, landing a solid blow. The archer goblin falls to the ground with a thud, defeated. Meanwhile, Istofa and the swordsman goblin are still locked in a fierce struggle. Distracted by its companion's defeat, the swordsman goblin's grip on its weapon loosens. Istofa seizes the momentary opening. He pushes back, forcing the roaring goblin off balance. Istofa lands a powerful blow, sending the goblin staggering backwards. The monster grits its teeth in pain. Istofa smirks, telling the creature that its feint won't work on him. The goblin lunges at him again. With a final decisive slash, Istofa cuts down the swordsman goblin. As the monster falls, Istofa catches his breath, exhausted but victorious. Kyle approaches the tired Istofa. He congratulates him on his victory. Istofa thanks him, admitting that Kyle's distraction was a huge help. Kyle smugly replies that it was all part of his plan. Istofa expresses his surprise that Kyle can fight head-on. Kyle explains that in that situation, direct combat was faster and more reliable than magic. He playfully tells Istofa to keep his eyes open for more, which makes Istofa laugh. Then Kyle's expression changes as he notices something. Kyle points out that the archer goblin's body is already vanishing. Istofa is surprised by the speed of its disappearance. Kyle urges him to retrieve the swordsman's magic stone before it disappears too. He notices a sparkle where the archer had been and wonders if it dropped an item. Istofa gets Kyle's attention. He shows him a mysterious black orb that has appeared. Istofa asks if it's a magic stone, but Kyle immediately tells him it's something else entirely. Kyle identifies the item as a homecoming pearl. Istofa is shocked, recalling that the information they had stated only scout goblins drop them. Kyle realizes their information was unconfirmed. He excitedly proclaims that they've discovered something new. Kyle explains that if this new information is verified, the adventurer who reports it will be rewarded, and their name might even be recorded. Istofa's face lights up with excitement. Kyle remarks that despite the trouble, they got lucky in the end and will return with a bang. Istofa praises Kyle, admitting he wouldn't have noticed the item alone. Flustered, Kyle tells him to stop. They agree it's time to go home. He then jokingly asks if Istofa wants to challenge the Guardian again, but Istofa recoils at the thought. Istofa declines another encounter with the Guardian, certain they just have to run again. Kyle agrees and tells Istofa to stay close, as this is his first time using the pearl. Istofa reflects that while it's a shame he couldn't go on, he's happy he met his friend, Kyle. Istofa realizes he never knew adventuring with someone could be so exciting. He hopes for more exploration tomorrow. Holding the pearl aloft, Kyle invokes its power, commanding it to guide them to the surface as it begins to glow. A blinding light envelops them, and Estofa shields his eyes as Kyle warns him not to let go. When the light fades, they find themselves on a cobblestone street, and Estofa wonders if they are truly outside. A familiar adventurer recognizes them, noting they must have used a homecoming pearl. Estofa is ecstatic, celebrating their escape with Kyle. But when he turns to his friend, he finds him unresponsive. Kyle feels sick, his world spinning from the teleportation. He mistakes the feeling for a curse and tells Estofa he's done for. The other adventurer explains that nausea is a common side effect for first-time users of the pearl. Estofa tries to comfort his ailing friend, telling him the feeling will pass. He encourages Kyle to hang in there. At the Adventurers Guild, Estofa presents his haul of monster drops to the clerk for trade. When the clerk announces the total payout of 48,000 yen, Estofa is stunned by the large sum. Kyle joins Estofa, remarking that the payment is fair given how many goblins they defeated. Kyle steps forward, telling the clerk he has information to sell regarding the homecoming pearl. The clerk listens to his offer. Kyle is shocked when the clerk informs him that they've received the same information many times before. The clerk explains that due to false reports, the guild now only buys verified information from trusted sources. Kyle is visibly frustrated by the news. As they leave the guild, Kyle apologizes for getting Estofa's hopes up. Estofa reassures him, saying he's just glad they're both safe. The clerk gives them a parting warning to be careful in the craftsmen's streets. He mentions hearing about recent robberies at night. They walk through the forewarned craftsmen's streets. Kyle silently takes in their surroundings, understanding the potential danger. Estofa observes how the dark, deserted alleyways would be a perfect hiding place for rogues. Estofa asks Kyle where he's staying and learns it's the Hashimi Hitsuji Lodge. He's surprised to learn Kyle is staying there too, with Kyle explaining it's his master's place. The conversation shifts as Estofa confirms Kyle's suspicion that they are being followed. Several rogues emerge from the shadows and surround them. Estofa grimly realizes these must be the rumored criminals the clerk had warned them about. One of the thugs demands they hand over all their belongings. Estofa's heart pounds with fear. A traumatic memory of being robbed resurfaces, and he panics, thinking they'll take everything again. Sensing his friend's distress, Kyle places a reassuring hand on his shoulder and tells him not to be afraid. Kyle reminds Estofa that after surviving the dungeon, these thugs are no match for them. He tells Estofa that they cannot take anything away from him. Estofa's fear gives way to newfound determination. Agreeing with Kyle, he readies his weapon for the fight. The rogues mock their defiance, brandishing their own swords. Their leader scoffs at them and orders his men to kill them. Unfazed, Kyle simply smirks, ready to engage. With a confident cry, Kyle unleashes a mega vortex spell. The rogues are caught off guard, yelling in surprise that he's a mage. Estofa calls out Kyle's name, but Kyle quickly reassures him that the magic isn't powerful enough to be lethal. As Kyle recovers from casting his spell, one of the rogues lunges at him with a sword. Before the blade can connect, Estofa leaps in and parries the attack with a clang of steel. The rogue is shocked by Estofa's strength. Kyle shouts encouragement, claiming the difference is their desire. His words resonate with Estofa, who realizes with newfound confidence that he is no longer afraid. Filled with resolve, Estofa reflects that he's finally moving on from his past of being victimized. Declaring that he's not the same person he once was, he powerfully shoves the rogue's blade aside. He shouts at the rogue not to get in his way. Driven by his desire to move forward, Estofa stands his ground. The force of his determination sends the other thugs stumbling backward as Kyle watches on. City guards arrive on the scene, demanding to know what the ruckus is. The rogues try to make a run for it but are stopped. A guard blows a whistle and tells the thugs they won't get away. Kyle coolly observes that the guards have finally arrived. A female knight approaches, thanking them for their cooperation. Kyle complains about the guards being late, earning a sharp retort from the knight. After Estofa explains they were on their way to an inn, she questions the captured rogues. As an apology for the trouble, the knight offers to escort them to their inn. Kyle proudly refuses, boasting that they could have handled it themselves as Estofa tries to stop him. Embarrassed, Estofa tries to bump him into silence. Just then a blonde elf arrives, whom Istofa recognizes as Stella. She greets him warmly, relieved to see him safe and sound. She explains that she came because she heard the commotion. She turns her attention to Kyle and asks if he is Istofa's friend. Kyle introduces himself and asks if she is Istofa's master. Stella introduces herself as Istofa's teacher. Kyle correctly identifies her expensive, elven-made equipment. Impressed, Stella compliments his sharp eye and asks if he comes from a wealthy family. Istofa senses a strange tension between Kyle and Stella, who both admit they were trying to make a strong first impression. They size each other up. Kyle acknowledges that Stella is a mage and predicts she'll become a very skilled one. Stella giggles at Kyle's assessment. Kyle warns Istofa that she has a bad personality, but Istofa defends her. He then excitedly tells Stella that he and Kyle will be exploring the dungeon together from now on. To his surprise, Stella agrees. Stella clarifies that while she won't be joining them, she won't stop Istofa from going on his own. She states that she won't stand in his way if he decides to team up with a decent ally. Putting her arm around him, she expresses her hope that he and Kyle get along well. Kyle voices his uncertainty about Stella. She tells Istofa that what's important is that Kyle is his friend, and that's all he needs. Istofa beams, happily agreeing. Reflecting on the eventful day, the group finally arrives at the inn. Kyle suggests they discuss their plans for the next day later. They all bid each other good night. As Kyle walks away, Stella watches him, lost in thought. She recalls that he was expected to be a genius, but his mana was below average. She muses that using magic for sport is a waste of his genius. It is revealed that Kyle is actually Kylus Fillard, the fourth prince of the Fillard kingdom. Stella realizes that Kyle is a nickname he uses with those he is close to, like Istofa. Istofa notices Stella humming happily and asks if something is wrong. She tells a confused Istofa that she believes he and Kyle, being naive in their own ways, will get along just fine. She brushes it off, saying she's just looking forward to tomorrow. A fresh morning dawns over the bustling city. From his window, Istofa looks out at the day beginning. Still groggy, Istofa begins to wake up. He is surprised to find Stella already awake in the room. She apologizes if she woke him, but he says it's fine. Istofa suddenly exclaims, excited about going to the dungeon today. Stella observes that Istofa seems like he had fun yesterday. She also comments that he seems to have gotten stronger, which surprises Istofa. When he looks confused, she reminds him that he and Kyle defeated the rogues the previous night. The memory of the attack in the backstreet comes flooding back to him. Istofa admits he still can't quite believe it himself. Stella muses on whether he feels a sense of accomplishment. She smiles warmly, telling him she's looking forward to watching him grow and try to be strong. Stella asks Istofa if he's excited to see his own growth too. Suddenly, Kyle bursts into the room, yelling for Istofa to get going. He playfully chides Istofa for being late, while Istofa notes how early Kyle is. Kyle announces they have places to stop by before going into the dungeon. Stella says she'll keep them company, to Kyle's surprise. He points out Istofa's ragged gear, stating their first stop is to get his equipment repaired. They make their way to the Fleet gear shop in the weaponry district. The owner, Fleet, and his daughter, Kay, greet Istofa. Istofa asks if they are closing up, but Fleet says no. Fleet explains that the guards warned them not to display weapons due to a rogue causing trouble with stolen goods and advises them to be careful. Kyle informs a shocked Fleet that those rogues attacked them last night, but they fought them off. Fleet is relieved to see Istofa is unscathed and praises him. He then inspects Istofa's ragged armor. Fleet correctly guesses that they are here to get the armor repaired. Kyle firmly states that they are here to buy new equipment. Fleet is skeptical, saying weapons are not easily replaced, but Kyle insists it depends on the situation. Kyle explains that Istofa's current gear is only suitable for the first floor's goblins. He then reveals to a surprised Fleet that they are going to the next floor soon. Fleet asks if this means they have made it to the Guardian of the Floor. Istofa confirms they have, but couldn't get past it. Istofa lists the various types of goblins and grass wolves they have defeated so far. Fleet is impressed, noting that they are progressing much faster than he expected. Fleet asks Istofa how he feels about his combat experiences so far. Istofa recalls the many close calls where a single mistake could have meant death. He acknowledges that he's sure there will be even stronger enemies in the future. Istofa explains that he needs more powerful equipment to progress through the floors. Kyle lightheartedly adds that if Istofa can't protect him, he will die soon. Fleet asks about their budget, and Istofa reveals he has the 48,000 yen he earned yesterday. Fleet understands and goes to fetch something. Kyle suggests a suit of metal armor for Istofa, but Istofa worries they can't afford it. Stella agrees that while metal armor offers good defense, it would be too heavy for Istofa. Kyle argues that armor is useless if you can't move and fight back, which Istofa agrees with. Istofa muses that armor is useless if it doesn't match the owner's strength, no matter how great it is. Stella concludes that well-balanced, hard leather armor that's easy to move in would be best. Just then Fleet returns, apologizing for the wait. He places an item on the counter for them to inspect. The group turns in anticipation. Istofa recognizes the item as hard leather armor. Kyle and Stella both sense a strange magical power coming from it. Stella asks if it's beast's leather, and Fleet confirms she noticed. She explains to a confused Istofa that it's made from beast-type monsters like the grass wolves he defeated. Fleet proudly lists the armor's qualities. It's lightweight yet durable enough to repel goblin arrows and withstand a blow from a guardian goblin. He guarantees its quality, impressing Istofa. He offers to sell the impressive armor to them at a discount. Suddenly, Kay smacks her father on the head. She scolds him for trying to sell the armor, revealing it's an item he couldn't sell because of its history. She warns him not to sell such shady stuff to Istofa, though Fleet insists he was about to explain. Istofa asks what she means by shady stuff. Fleet explains the armor was custom-made for a nobleman's child who died mid-production, halting its creation. Because of this, rumors spread that the armor was cursed due to the use of beast's leather. Kyle immediately warns Istofa not to touch the cursed item, as not all curses can be lifted. After inspecting it, Stella confidently declares that the armor isn't cursed but just normal beast leather armor. Fleet concedes this is true, but explains that superstitious adventurers who rely on luck still avoid it. Undeterred, Istofa asks how much it costs. Fleet names the price, 70,000 yen. Kyle is furious at the high price, but Fleet insists it's the lowest he can offer and a bargain for its quality. Stella calmly points out to Kyle that they can now afford it. Fleet turns to Istofa for his decision. Fleet offers to mark the item as sold if Istofa wants it. He reminds Istofa that since he already earned 48,000 yen, he should be able to make 70,000 in no time. Kyle reassures Istofa that there's no rush to go to the next floor and he can build up his skills and money on the first level. Istofa thanks Kyle for his consideration. Fleet jokes asking if Istofa is sure, considering the armor might be unlucky. Istofa recalls how Fleet has always provided him with the best equipment suggestions. Because of this, he tells the shopkeeper that he believes in his craftsmanship more than he believes in luck. Moved by the young adventurer's faith in him, Fleet is left momentarily speechless. He decides to give Istofa some protective gear to wear for the day. He explains that with a small armor piece, the total cost will be 10,000 yen. Istofa tries on his new gear and asks what they think, and Stella tells him he looks good. Kyle agrees that as long as he has protective gear, he should be safer. With a determined look, Kyle tells Istofa he's counting on him. Istofa smiles and replies, "Me too." The two share a fist bump, sealing their pact. As they leave the shop, Fleet and Kay wish them well, telling Istofa to do his best. Kyle suggests they stop by the guild next. Stella reminds them that if they are going together, they will have to register Kyle as a new party member. Stella then adds that she wants to look for one more person to join their party. Kyle agrees, pointing out that on their own, they would be an all-offense party and need another person for support. Istofa understands, suggesting they need a healer who can use recovery magic. He then wonders if anyone would be willing to join a party consisting of a rookie swordsman and a mage who lacks mana. Brushing aside their concerns, Stella enthusiastically tells them to go. She pulls them along, declaring their mission to find a new ally. Their search begins near the main gate of the labyrinth city. Meanwhile, a mysterious cloaked figure walks through the city streets. They have finally arrived in the labyrinth city. They muse that it would be reassuring to have a friend to explore the dungeon with. However, they are determined not to accept just anyone. The figure puts their faith in destiny to bring them a worthy companion. They smile, looking forward to what the future holds. They observe a well-equipped, elf-like adventurer who politely refuses to join any party, noting that his gear suggests he's a frontline fighter. Dejected, Istofa laments that no one is interested in joining their party of beginners. Kyle, who anticipated this, explains that experienced healers prefer established teams. Istofa suggests looking for a non-healer, but Kyle insists that what they truly need is a partner they can trust, as cooperation is paramount. Just as Istofa is regretting not asking for her advice, Stella finishes her own business. As she wishes them well, Kyle suddenly interjects, claiming he has a recommendation, much to Istofa's surprise. Istofa questions Kyle's refusal of Stella's help. Kyle explains that they can't always rely on her. He adds that the relationship with a party partner is different from just being friends. Kyle emphasizes that he wants a partner they can trust as a friend, not just a pawn. Istofa agrees they need to find someone through their own efforts. For now, they decide to focus on exploring the dungeon together to improve their abilities. As they walk, a figure rushes past them, catching their attention. They see a commotion up ahead, and Kyle points out that someone appears to be arguing with the front guard. They are surprised to see that the person arguing is a dark elf, and even more so that he's a healer. The elf seems to be losing his patience with the guard. The dark elf and Istofa lock eyes for a moment. Then, to Istofa's shock, the elf suddenly turns from the guard and grabs his hands. Recognizing the oddity of the situation, the dark elf introduces himself as Dorma. Istofa, taken aback by his unexpectedly high voice, gives his name. Dorma then directly asks Istofa to explore the dungeon with him. The proposal leaves both Istofa and Kyle speechless. As Dorma tries to lead a hesitant Istofa away, boasting of his strength, Kyle angrily intervenes. He pulls them apart and confronts Dorma for his impoliteness. Kyle then firmly states that he is Istofa's partner. Kyle urges Istofa to speak up. Istofa explains to Dorma that he can't just abandon his official partner. After a moment of thought and some teasing, Dorma nonchalantly agrees to let Kyle tag along, much to Kyle's irritation. Dorma immediately presents Istofa and Kyle to the startled guard as his partners. With his new party, he asks for passage. The guard reluctantly lets them through. Istofa expresses his uncertainty, but Kyle suggests they observe for now. As they watch, Dorma celebrates finally gaining entry, loudly complaining about the discrimination he faced for trying to enter the dungeon alone as a healer. Istofa asks why he was trying to enter alone, and Kyle notes that for a healer it's suicidal. Dorma explains that he tried to form a party upon arriving, but everyone rejected him because he's a dark elf. Kyle bluntly interjects that his weird personality was likely the real reason for the rejections. Istofa notes the similarities between Kyle and Dorma, which Kyle denies. As Dorma tries to press onward, Kyle stops him. He asks an important question: which god does Dorma worship? Confused by the question, Istofa listens as Kyle explains the theology. Healers only worship the specific god that grants them a revelation. The nature of that god is directly connected to the magic they can use. Kyle elaborates that while most healers are skilled in healing and support, some only learn strange, impractical spells. Judging by Dorma's reaction, Kyle bluntly asks if he's one of these so-called lame healers. Dorma insists he can use strengthening magic, and Kyle demands to know what kind. Istofa tries to intervene, telling Kyle not to be so harsh, but Kyle dismisses him. He insists that cooperation is important. The situation makes Istofa anxious, reminding him of his own past. Istofa defends Dorma, reminding Kyle that everyone has secrets. He points out that he himself doesn't know everything about Kyle, and that shouldn't stop them from being partners. Istofa reminds Kyle of his own desire for a friend, not a pawn. Conceding the point, Kyle apologizes to Dorma for his insensitivity. He suggests they put it behind them and that they'll come to an understanding by fighting together. Touched by Istofa's support, Dorma smiles. Istofa thanks him. As a gesture of gratitude, he decides to reveal which god he worships. Dorma reveals the name of his god is Neil Chant. He clarifies that Neil Chant is the god of underground armor. While Istofa quietly processes the name, Kyle reacts with disbelief. He questions the very idea of a god of underground armor. He clutches his head, confused, as the god of armor is typically known for sharp abilities. Unable to explain his reaction, Kyle simply says they'll understand eventually. He instructs Dorma to support Istofa, and Dorma happily agrees. Istofa looks down at his own gear, beginning to understand the connection. Estofa runs ahead, his mind racing with questions about this strange god. Dorma finds the lack of monsters strange, and Estofa agrees, having seen goblins the day before. While Kyle urges caution, Dorma starts to relax. Unbeknownst to them, a monster stalks them from the tall grass. The monster lunges at Kyle. Estofa cries out for Kyle in alarm. He realizes it was Dorma who shoved him to safety. Dorma shoves Kyle out of the monster's path, taking the full force of the attack himself. The creature's jaws clamp down on his arm. Dorma remains firm, a look of grim determination on his face. Estofa and Kyle stare in shock. Dorma, splattered with blood, turns to them and casually asks why they look so surprised, reminding them that he is a healer with a physical attack. Standing over the defeated grass wolf, Dorma's combat prowess is on full display, leaving Kyle and Estofa to watch in awe. Kyle remarks that this must be the true strength of a dark elf. Kyle and Estofa are amazed. They can't believe Dorma defeated a grass wolf by himself. Dorma winces slightly from a minor wound. Estofa rushes over to check on him, apologizing for not being able to protect him properly. Dorma is confused by the apology. Dorma dismisses Estofa's concern, explaining that as an advanced god, it's his duty to handle such threats. Estofa is left to ponder the basics of battle. He confidently states that he can deal with a single grass wolf alone. While Estofa finds Dorma's strength reliable, he agrees to just do what he must. Kyle dryly remarks that he'd likely die if he faced a grass wolf. Dorma calls Kyle a burden, but Kyle declares himself the brain of the journey. Kyle retorts that his physical weakness isn't a problem. Estofa asks Dorma if Kyle is always so abrasive, and Dorma confirms it. Overhearing them, Kyle gets annoyed. He questions if Dorma even has friends, which makes Dorma defensive. Estofa enthusiastically asks if he can be Dorma's friend. Kyle hesitantly agrees. Dorma is genuinely touched, admitting he would be very happy to be their friend. He accepts their offer. Kyle then steers the conversation back to their goal, collecting magic stones to earn money for new armor. Dorma agrees, stating that proceeding with their current equipment isn't exciting. He also wants to level up and move to the second level. Estofa is overjoyed by his enthusiasm. He remarks on how strong and dependable Dorma is. Dorma encourages Estofa to rely on him, since they're friends now. He tells him to drop the formal san. This gives Estofa pause. He wonders if it's truly okay to rely on others. Suddenly, their conversation is cut short, as Kyle alerts them to approaching enemies. Two goblins, a fighter and a swordsman, emerge from the grass, ready for a fight. The party faces a goblin fighter and a goblin swordsman. Estofa recognizes them as the goblins he defeated the day before, and knows not to be careless. He worries about how they'll defeat both at once. Dorma quickly takes command, telling Estofa he will deal with the swordsman. He instructs Estofa to face the other, larger goblin, admitting that he wouldn't be able to handle the giant. Kyle tells Estofa and Dorma he will attack first. He plans to create an opening and leave the rest to them. Estofa and Dorma agree. As the goblins charge, Kyle unleashes his Megan Voltex spell. The lightning spell stuns the two goblins. Seizing the opportunity, Kyle shouts for them to move, and Estofa and Dorma charge into battle. Estofa engages the large goblin fighter, wondering if a frontal assault will be enough. He grits his teeth and pushes forward with all his might, struggling against the creature's power. Estofa is suddenly taken aback by an unexpected appearance. A goblin magician has joined the fray, adding a dangerous new threat to the battlefield. Seeing Estofa falter, Kyle yells at him to stay focused and keep going. Dorma echoes the sentiment, reminding him that he isn't fighting alone. Their words reach Estofa and he understands. He realizes this isn't just his battle. His friends are fighting alongside him. With newfound clarity, Estofa understands that they must combine their strength to win, for that is the meaning of relying on each other. For the sake of his friends, he can't leave them alone. Because of that, he resolves to keep going forward. Fueled by this resolve, Estofa declares that with his friends, he can go even further. He lets out a powerful roar, telling the monsters not to bother them. He lands a decisive blow on the goblin fighter. Standing over the defeated goblin, Estofa catches his breath. His friends rush to his side, congratulating him on his victory. He has pushed past his limits and gone further. After the fight, they examine the magic stones dropped by the goblins. Kyle finds the rewards unhelpful for their current needs. He wishes for more useful items for battle. Dorma then announces that he acquired a new magic from the battle. Kyle correctly guesses it's a magic of armory. Dorma proudly explains his new spell is called Heavy Weapon, and its only effect is to make a weapon heavier. Kyle is initially baffled by its seeming uselessness, but after a moment of consideration, he realizes it might have its uses. Kyle decides they'll continue hunting for goblins. However, the fields have gone silent. Istofa and Kyle note the lack of monsters since their last fight. Dorma mentions they need to defeat many more goblins to afford new armor. Istofa has a feeling their expectations won't be met so easily. Dorma theorizes that the goblins must be gathered somewhere. Kyle agrees that there are chances of goblins appearing if they wander around. Istofa voices his concern that wandering around is dangerous, but Kyle counters that it would be a waste to rush to their gathering place. The party discusses their options for retreat, with Kyle musing about having a teleportation gemstone. Kyle assures them they'll retreat at the right time. Suddenly, another adventurer stumbles. He collapses right in front of them. Startled, Kyle identifies the newcomer as an adventurer. He tells Dorma to heal the injured man. The man explains that his injuries are from a recent battle with a goblin. The injured adventurer recounts how a goblin with abnormal power wiped out all of his friends. He desperately pleads for help, leaving the party in shocked silence. An injured adventurer appears before the party, pleading for aid. He frantically explains that a goblin with abnormal powers appeared and killed all of his friends. Kyle tries to calm the man, asking him to explain the details of what happened. The man introduces himself as Marison, a healer. He recounts how his party was attacked by a goblin with a sword while ascending to the second hierarchy. The creature's power was beyond common sense, killing his magic user friend with a single attack. Kyle finds this strange, as swordsman goblins are typically found on the first hierarchy, and Istofa notes that it seems too strong. Kyle considers the situation. Dorma suggests the enemy might be using a special weapon. Marison grows more desperate, explaining that his warrior friend is still fighting and won't survive for long. Istofa, moved by his plea, insists they must help. Istofa wants to muster his strength to help. He turns to ask for his friend's opinions. Dorma states that helping someone in trouble is his duty as a priest, and agrees to go. Marison is overjoyed and offers to lead them. Istofa calls for a hesitant Kyle to hurry up, or he'll be left behind. Kyle points out that there are many new hunters around and suggests it could be a trap. He also argues that if Marison's story is true, they'd be facing an enemy no single adventurer could beat, and asks if Istofa still wants to go. Despite the risks, Istofa feels he cannot just leave the man to his fate. Kyle sighs in resignation. He tells Istofa that they will need to run if things get too difficult. Istofa agrees. Kyle understands this is not just Marison's problem. He feels it's his duty to protect Kyle and Dorma if something happens. Istofa steals his resolve, telling himself they need to be strong. Marison leads the party up a hill, announcing that this is where his group was ambushed. As they arrive, the strong scent of blood fills the air. They discover the body of a fallen adventurer. Marison confirms the deceased is his wizard friend. Kyle asks about the warrior, and Dorma points towards a figure. It is not the warrior friend, but the powerful goblin itself. The party beholds the formidable goblin, standing triumphantly over its victim, a tattered cape flowing in the wind. Istofa and Dorma stare in shock at the menacing goblin. Seeing its guard is down, Kyle immediately shouts for them to attack. He unleashes a Volt spell. However, the goblin dodges Kyle's magic with incredible speed. Kyle is shocked that it dodged and prepares another attack. Marison casts Speed Assist on Istofa. Istofa is surprised to feel his body become lighter. Dorma instructs Marison to pull his friend to the back and heal him, while Istofa agrees to hold off the goblin. He notices the creature's special sword. Istofa believes if they can somehow unleash its power, they might have a chance. It's not only strong but also incredibly swift, easily dodging Kyle's magic. Istofa wonders if the creature is reading their movements. The goblin proves to be unlike any other they've faced. Istofa struggles to fend off the goblin's relentless assault, barely managing to block its strikes. Seeing his friend in trouble, Dorma charges in to provide support. Dorma scolds Istofa for his reckless actions, warning that his carelessness could have gotten him killed. Istofa yells for Dorma to be careful. He realizes this is no ordinary swordsman. The goblin attacks Dorma, who narrowly parries the blow. Kyle urgently tells everyone to get into position. He asks what kind of creature they are fighting if it's not a swordsman type. Dorma fears the worst, suspecting this might be a goblin hero. Kyle asks what that is, and Dorma explains he has some uncertain information about it. He explains that it is a very special individual that usually appears on the second level or higher, though it has been seen once on the first level. Kyle finds the information hard to believe. However, he has to admit the goblin's power is definitively greater than any other. As Istofa prepares to charge again, Dorma shouts a warning, telling him he cannot forcibly snatch its sword. Istofa is confused by Dorma's warning. Dorma explains that the goblin is purposefully unleashing its sword's power. Suddenly, the goblin's blade begins to glow with a magical aura. Istofa is stunned as he watches the sword shine. Kyle notices ancient writing appearing on the blade. Dorma recognizes the words and cries out in horror, realizing the spell means to cut all their ties. He warns them not to come forward. Dorma screams for Istofa to get away as the goblin hero raises its weapon. Ignoring the warning, Istofa charges forward, only to be met by the full force of the goblin's empowered strike. The enchanted sword slices clean through Istofa's arm. His friends cry out his name in shock. An enraged Dorma charges the goblin, activating his heavy weapon skill. The goblin roars in pain from the attack. Dorma's attack connects, injuring the goblin. He sees the creature is now looking for its dropped sword, and realizes they need to end the fight quickly. Kyle, seeing his chance, prepares a powerful spell. Kyle unleashes a massive gigavolt spell, striking the goblin directly. The goblin screams as it is hit. Despite the powerful attack, it's not enough to finish the beast. Kyle yells to an injured Istofa, asking if he is all right. He tells him to hang on. Lying on the ground, Istofa feels he has failed and wonders if he should have just left as Kyle suggested. He feels that he must have made a mistake again. But seeing his friends still fighting gives him pause. The fight is not over yet. Istofa resolves that he needs to protect them. An idea forms in Istofa's mind. Kyle continues to blast the goblin with Gigavolt. Kyle realizes the goblin has memorized his magic's trajectory, rendering his attacks useless. As Dorma asks what to do, Kyle tells him to be quiet and think. Kyle has a sudden realization and thinks it's a great idea. The goblin dodges another one of Kyle's attacks. He calls out to Istofa, telling him to get ready now. With grim determination, Istofa grabs the goblin's own severed arm, which is still clutching the glowing sword. He prepares to strike. Using the goblin's own weapon against it, Istofa lands a powerful finishing blow, cleaving the creature in two. As the dust settles, Kyle and Dorma realize they've won. Istofa whispers that they did it before collapsing. Dorma rushes to Istofa's side, telling Kyle to bring the hero's arm so he can reconnect it. Istofa, relieved, is just glad his friends are safe. Istofa feels proud that he defeated the goblin with his own strength as Marison tends to his own companion. Dorma assures Kyle that Istofa has only fainted and will be all right after some rest. Kyle agrees, looking down at his friend with a proud smile. He commends Istofa for a job well done, having overcome the crisis with his friends. A mysterious elf